welcome back to another edition of the Awake and Aware radio show. This is your host, Infinite Consciousness, commonly known as Jason. Please visit Awake and Aware and Part of the Solution on Facebook and check out Freedom from Compulsions at www.freedomfromcompulsions.vpweb.com. If you would like to access the archive of all the past Awake and Aware radio shows, go to www.blogtalkradio.com/infinite consciousness. Last week we had the last 2 weeks actually, we had the guys from the Collective Evolution from Canada, the makers of the Collective Evolution 1 and Collective Evolution 2 on, discussing their documentaries on how consciousness is now evolving at a much quicker rate as we start going through a different energetic construct. Tonight I have the members of Occupy Poughkeepsie here in the Hudson Valley, which is the hub of the Hudson Valley Occupy movement, and we are glad to have them on tonight because they're really have a lot of good things going on down there. So before I get started, let me just welcome Occupy Poughkeepsie on, and who do I have on the line right now?
Echo. Four echoes.
Okay. Well, hello, echoes. Well, tonight, I want to start off just talking about how, we did go through a couple shows, like I said, interviewing different people about how we're going through a collective evolution. And right now, I just think what's beautiful about what's happening as far as the Occupy movement, as well as other movements going on globally, is that it's not a movement of a specific religious ideology or a specific illusion of a political party. For all political parties, it's just different faces on the same corrupt coin. It's more an evolution and a revolution of things that are to come, globally. Because people, I think, are finally starting to see, through all these years that, to be blunt, we're all being screwed one way or another. And I just think it's important to understand, all of us, that we hold this whole entire manipulation that's been going on for thousands of years in power. So why don't you guys get into telling me what you guys, as far as the Hudson Valley Hub, as well as connected with everything else going on globally, Occupy Poughkeepsie, what are you guys about?
What are we about? Yeah. All right. Occupy Poughkeepsie is like all the other branches of the occupation movement. We are a center for discussion, basically. We all have our own individual concerns, whether it's, the spiritual cap of our people, or it's the economic crisis you're going to, or you have a problem with the political process. But this is a center for discussion on how to come up with solutions to this and how to grow collectively and become more about each other than about ourselves, and more about how we can survive and thrive as a community and work together to get common understanding to fix, these problems that we consistently face day by day. Otherwise, we wouldn't have this occupation in the first place.
All right. And I think it is important, absolutely, to spread awareness. And it seems like that's one of the big portions of what you guys are trying to do is, spread awareness of what's happening. And, certain things, just in recent times, in the recent couple weeks, what's happening is, there's many different rip-offs, such as the $1 trillion student loan rip-off that's happening, where basically an entire generation is being tricked into taking on crushing debt that just enriches the banks again. The banks, what do they do? Basically they can loan out 10 times the amount that they hold. If you give me $10, I can loan you $100, and that doesn't make much sense unless you're just transferring digits on a screen. And that's how they make a lot of money as far as this, and we'll get into that in a few minutes. But, other things that are happening, such as the Federal Reserve, I think it's important, this is just from my perspective through Awake and Aware, that to understand who controls the banks. The banks, such as the Federal Reserve, a lot of people still think to this day that it's federal, and it's actually a private bank made of numerous other banks, primarily owned by the Rothschild family, who own the Bank of England and the IMF and the World Bank, that basically enslave nations with debt, with complete debt. And, I think people are finally waking up to say, this is crazy. We're being controlled by paper. I mean, literally worthless paper. And the only reason money has power is because we give it the power. If we wanted to pay for things and pay for a housing with potato chips, I know it sounds silly, but I use a silly example with it. If we gave potato chips power, well, boom, that's what we would be using to control us since Babylon, basically. I mean, because the same bloodlines that came out of Babylon eventually turned into the Bowers and then eventually changed their name to Rothschild. And they're the ones that created the economic system. But, again, they're the power structure, but we're the ones that give them that power, because if we didn't go along with it, the whole thing would collapse. So, I mean, as far as the banks, what is the beef that you guys are trying to really push for it and try to expand and try to explore, and as far as foreclosures and all this kind of stuff, foreclosing on people who really, I mean, a lot of it was unconstitutional, and a lot of the things that are happening as far as the new taxes being pushed and a lot of different strikes going on regarding the IMF and the global stealing of $700 million of clients' money, for instance, by MF Global. What is it that we, as a collective force, need to do to inform the masses when it comes to the economic scam?
Well, this is Echo number 2 speaking. Hello.
Hello.
We are all here for individual reasons. My reason for being here is the Citizens United versus FEC ruling last year. The Supreme Court essentially allowed corporations to donate a limited amount of funds to politicians. That's not right, and it's not American. It's something that basically enslaves the 99% of people and continues to have the elite rise up and have more wealth. It's something that needs to be resolved, and it's something that we can do. However, we need to inform, as you were saying, inform the public, spread awareness, and by doing that, this is why we're occupying.
Echo, like my fellow Echo said too, it is a huge problem. Politicians, who do they really represent if a corporation can spend an unlimited amount of wealth upon them? Do they really represent the people or not? I mean, my real concern coming into this was education. Why I seek education. I want to become a more competent human and a better worker in the workforce, but then I get stuck and slammed with debt just so I could have a title of, a very nice college that I graduated from. And that just seemed unfair to me and wrong, and like I was immediately enslaving my life. And, spreading awareness will come to these occupations. At these occupations, you engage in the discussion with people from everywhere, all around the community, who have the same types of dilemmas and problems and stories that they face, and then, join into it, and then join into the march and the rallies. And we're obviously making a huge impact now. I mean, this Occupy has become a conversation in everybody's household. Like, we are spreading awareness right now, but our main goal is, come here. Come and talk.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of slander, too, being slung around about you guys as well, which is kind of humorous in a way when you look at some of it. And I'll get to that in a little bit. And, I think it's awesome and beautiful what you guys are doing. But, you can see the, organizations such as Fox News and, MSNBC and CNN, which are all Zionist-controlled news agencies, which all get their news from AP and Reuters, and which are Rothschild-owned. And getting this information out, and as you're saying, getting screwed by the educational loans and all this kind of stuff, just for trying to get an education to raise your ability in society. And another piece of that, in my opinion anyway, is seeing that we're not only paying for our own enslavement and getting more and more debt and in turn tacking on interest payments and all this kind of stuff. But we're paying, in a sense, nowadays. I mean, in modern America, I don't really see much education left in the educational systems. I mean, there are more indoctrination centers than ever before. I mean, they've always been to a certain extent. But,
completely.
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry. It's just like you just remember, this is one Echo speaking, but that was just like a huge thing going up throughout public high school. It was more of like, this is the facts of the situation, regardless of whether they're facts. You know, they could have been very subjective titles on, you know, for history on certain historic figures, but this is the facts of the situation, and it's like, if you disagree with it, you're wrong, and it's not a center for discussion anymore. It's just like, agree, or like, it'll be looked down upon or get a zero because you're wrong if you don't agree. You either accept it or, you know, you're just a bad dog.
Precisely, you know. And not only that, though, I mean, let's take it a little step further, too. What I find humorous about it is, you know, I'm going to give you a whole bunch of information, and you parrot that back to me in an identical way that I told you, and I'm going to give you an A. But if you use your mind and use your actual thoughts and start examining what you believe to be true and why you believe it to be true, you come back with an entirely different answer, which is just as logical, you know, if not more. And what happens is, you know, you're labeled as disruptive a lot of times in the modern school systems and sent to the school psychologist on certain occasions and possibly diagnosed with something like ADHD and ADD, which is, in my opinion, sure, you have a lot of energy maybe, but maybe you're bored being indoctrinated. And this energy, as far as the ones that truly do have excess energy, in my opinion, it's a gift, not a disorder. It's a gift. The problem is in our left brain society, which is structure and thinking in the box, they don't really teach the kids to focus this energy in a beautiful way. I mean, the energies are changing, and that's what I think part of this is as well. But if you think against, you will be drugged and diagnosed and thrown in the corner. We have no use for you. And it's such a shame that what's happening, you know. And it's been happening for a while, but, you know, it's just getting much, much worse. I do want to touch on, too, as far as the banks go. We got things such as, you know, Libya. You know, Libya, Gaddafi, no one's saying as Gaddafi was an angel. But if you notice, I mean, if you really pay attention to who dictates U.S. and U.K. foreign policy as well as other foreign policies, but in the U.S., for instance, you know, who dictates U.S. foreign policy? Israel. You know, Israel does it through things such as AIPAC. And, you know, why is that important? Because we are going to war against many nations because those nations are taking the power away from more Rothschild central banks. Now, I know I mentioned the Rothschilds a lot, but, you know, when it comes to the banking institutions, they're the tip of the peak there. And that's why I focus on them. And in Libya, for instance, Gaddafi took the power away from the central bank, which was owned by the Rothschilds at the time, was pushing to start using a gold-based currency. And, you know, in that country, women had more rights than most nations in Africa. You know, people, as far as housing crisis, there was almost none. It was, I don't want to use the word free because there is no free nation. There's no such thing as a free nation. There's many levels of enslavement. There's no freedom in any nation. But where are we going next? You know, we're going to Syria. You know, Syria, which we already have ground troops, it's just not being reported by the corporate media. You know, what did they do? They took the power away from the central bank, which was owned by the Rothschilds. We are now, us in Israel and the UK, have been looking for every excuse in the world to attack Iran. What did Iran do? They took away the power from the central bank owned by blah, blah, blah. You know, and same thing with even Hussein. I mean, again, Hussein, I'm not saying he was an angel either. But what he did was took the power away from the central bank as well. So every nation that takes the power, the enslavement tool, away from the global manipulation, that's when we go in and attack. I mean, there's so many nations that there's so far worse human rights violations. But we support them, like in Bahrain. You know, we support them. We attack the ones that take the power away from the banks. And I just want to know what your perspective is, any of you, your perspectives on also our war, because our tax dollars, our federal tax dollars, which is not federal again, is actually private Rothschild money, supports and funds not only all the illegal wars that we enter into, but it also, we give billions, literally billions, to Israel, which is a rich nation. A rich nation. And why? Because they dictate our foreign policy. So as far as wars and the banks and the manipulation through money, are you guys focusing on the war aspect of this as well?
Well, again, we're speaking individually, but the premise of Occupy in general, it does relate to this situation that's occurring where the elite basically control the direction of the country and their foreign policy and their economic policy. There's no talk with the middle class or lower class, and we hold no power with the title. We do hold power inside, and we're not utilizing that yet, but with Occupy we are slowly opening up the realization that we have that power. In regards to the banking systems, we don't have a say either. I mean, the whole premise of Occupy is that there's no say anymore for the middle class, for the lower class.
And I think there's always been this, passive underlying thought that, we don't have a say, and that slowly our rights are being taken from us, and no one's really listening to us. So that's what this occupation is. It's just a physical manifestation of that thought that, screw it. We are going to be here, and we are going to make our own decisions and our own solutions and implement them, like them or not.
All right, good. And I think that's so important to really, being able to express that and say, look, we are paying attention. You need to start listening. You need to start listening. And I want to get to some solutions down the road, but I'm sorry, did I cut you off? Or?
No, I said exactly. I was agreeing.
Oh, okay. And as far as the foreclosures going on, real quick, I don't really want to spend much time on this, but, for instance, in Nevada, they just passed, or they're either passed or trying to pass, I don't recall, a new law that will make it illegal for the banks to foreclose on houses without any proof, because, Bank of America, as you guys know, has been foreclosing on many houses without them even holding a note for the house. Some of them have been foreclosed on which never even had any connection with Bank of America. This one guy, for instance, his house was foreclosed on, and he paid cash for the house. and Bank of America foreclosed on him, which is completely insane. And, I mean, they were completely backed and allowed to do it. But what happened was, I don't know if you've seen, some people were starting to foreclose on the banks. And they actually had police there taking out desks and all this other stuff. It was actually a beautiful thing. So you can use their power against them when it comes to this stuff. But I just think it's great that, people are saying, look, I'm not going to take it anymore. But I think it's important for people to realize, to raise awareness and realize that it's not just us being, screwed by a financial fascist movement here, but it's also important to understand that, why am I losing my house? I'm losing my house because, let's say, maybe I lost my job. And why did I lose my job? Well, my job lost funding and it lost all of its resources and da-da-da-da-da. Well, why did that happen? Well, the banks, again, called in their loans just like they did pre-Great Depression. And once that happens, the banks created it. Well, who's taking away your house? The banks. Well, you didn't do anything. You didn't do anything wrong. But what happens is the same people that are creating the problem are also taking away your home. And that's where people got to finally stop and say, look, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to leave my home, just because the banking institutions. And I want to say real quick, too, that a lot of people have to realize that this is not a maybe, this is a definite, that this economic crisis globally is no accident. It's not because of bubbles and booms and busts and all this other stuff. This thing has been constructed a long time ago, just like the Great Depression was when they called in all the loans, and that's what created the Great Depression. Same thing is happening now, and this has been planned for a while. At the end of 2008, we already talked about how that was the first part of this current economic crisis in the U.S. anyway. The next part will start, and that's the plan anyway, end of 2011 and beginning of 2012 sometime. So, again, there's a second wave coming, and that's what I think is important, too, regarding the Occupy movement, because, people need to really be aware that it's coming, it's constructed, and it doesn't have to come, because if we just stop going along with it, nothing will happen. Of course, there'll be a lot of other chaos, I'll put that in quotes, that could happen. But absolutely, and I think protesters are starting to also wake up and realize that a police state is not coming. The police state's been here. It's been here. It's just not been fully implemented. That's the only thing. What is police? Police comes from policy, and they're policy pushers. They're policy officers. They're no longer peace officers for the people. They're policy officers. And I'm not saying all police officers are good or all police officers are bad, because there's a lot of great police out there. And from what I've seen when I was down there by you guys a couple times, the police seem to be, pretty much supportive. And if not supportive, they were still, I guess...
Hands off.
Hands off, yes, thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah,
so,
wow, that was a lot. We definitely believe, especially what you were saying about policy holders. I know you and I actually met in the press tent one day, and we were discussing this, and that's one of the key topics that this occupation, Occupy Poughkeepsie, is focused on as well. Our institutions, our policing institutions, for me personally, I believe they're meant to be peace officers. Their skill sets should include amazing, understandability and ability to mediate and compromise, not the authoritative, kind of thought they impose on people, and that sense of fear they give, their common civilians. That promotes distrust between people, and it gives this separate identity to police officers, and it's people don't want to be associated with them, and it's it just adds on to what you were saying. I mean, it's just state of fear, and it's almost like a police state, and it's just when is there a line that you can't cross? And I feel like maybe they've already passed this, and so that is what this occupation is about. It's as much a rebellion as a call to arms for the complete and total change of this whole structure that is, imposing and debilitating to, the human condition.
Right. And I think also with that, what you said is that the police got to realize, too, I mean, you've got to remember the police now have been, that's why they've turned into policy officers, too. They've been militarized a while back now. They're more militarized. I mean, if you look at a police officer's just uniforms, for instance, you look at from the 1950s, let's say, there's the friendly guy, getting the cat out of the tree for you. And now a lot of them, I'm not saying all of them, but a lot of them have this gear that almost looks like, modern Nazi Germany, all black wear. You got to remember colors that you wear not only affect you, but affects the ones that you're I guess interacting with. It affects you emotionally. It actually triggers different emotional responses internally. But let's talk about what are some things that we can do to take the power away from the banks. Because sure, we can say, stop going along with it, but it's a little more deep than that. You can't just say, all right, well, I'm just not going to go along with it anymore. And I think there's a lot of good things going on. Like for instance, some people within the movement are talking about starting to pay with silver to beat the banks. Instead of paying with money, which is not backed by gold anymore. That's why it says Federal Reserve note, which basically means it's worthless paper again. For instance, Bank of America, they have now added a $5 per month fee to use a debit card for purchases. All right, and if you have a bank account, you can convert some of the money to silver and spend it. That's if you have that ability. So that's one way. I mean, there's many other ways that we can do this kind of stuff, like a general strike, for instance. Nobody goes to work, nobody goes to school. Basically, you shut the city down in that manner. Now, of course, it would take a large group to be able to do that. Like, for instance, in Cleveland, the Occupy movement scored a huge victory in Cleveland after seeking a federal injunction eliminating the curfew. Because I know you guys dealt with, you guys were ticketed, I believe, for staying there after curfew and all that, and then they stopped bugging you guys. But, there's little by little, there's a lot of great stuff happening in the benefit of the Occupy movement. Civil disobedience is so important. Like it's happening in Athens right now, a huge anti-tax rebellion going on, brewing in Greece. I mean, Greece is collapsing, and that's being totally destroyed by these international banking cartel. Because the governments, most governments are corporations to begin with. Because I know you guys mentioned that, the corporate donors. There's like no cap and all that kind of stuff. You got to remember the U.S. government, by definition, is a corporation, just like England is. They're corporate entities owned by an international banking cartel. And, even in Greece I'm talking about, even the elected local officials are joining the fray in seemingly random but increasingly prevalent wave of civil disobedience. Basically the local authorities are actually joining the people, which is awesome to see because they're seeing, look, we're being screwed just as much as the, people out there are. And strength is in numbers. It's definitely in numbers. We are all one. We're all one collective force, one collective consciousness, if you want to put it that way. And the minute we hate or separate, we're separating the portions of our own collective self, and we have the powers in numbers. And that's why they use certain things such as different religious ideologies and political parties and race and income bracket and blah, 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 blah to separate us from us. There are various tools to separate us from us. It's just important to look at, how it's done. And, here's another one, too. I'm looking at a headline right now as I'm talking to you. Occupy the Vatican serves eviction notice, and this is just the title of this, against child-raping church as Canadian media distorts the event. What they were trying to do is peacefully occupy it and enforce a legal eviction order against the Roman Catholic Church for its murder of thousands of residential school children. I don't know if you guys are aware of all the, the natives that were slaughtered, the children that were just slaughtered in Canada by the church. And I don't remember what years it was. But Occupy Oakland, Occupy Oakland. By the way, we're going off live in 90 seconds, but we're going to be on for another 15 minutes, okay? But Occupy Oakland is to begin a general strike as well, if they have not started that already. I don't recall, or wasn't that the 5th? Was that the 5th that was happening?
Yes. Occupy Oakland basically had, and you were speaking of how to get the banks back into our people's power. Occupy Oakland had around 100,000 plus people for a general strike. They took the overpass. There was a massive video of the helicopter was showing all these people. It was quite the scene. And they actually had several occupiers sit in the banks, Wells Fargo banks, Bank of America. And in fact, in relation to the $5 fee, we believe that because of these general strikes, these bank transfer day, for example, yesterday, we had almost 1 million people around the country going to local banks and credit unions, which is an excellent thing. But for the $5 charge, that's actually being deleted right now. They're considering to get rid of it. And we pretty much believe that's because of these movements that Occupy around the country have done. So that's a positive thing. This is a good thing that's happening.
All right, beautiful.
As network.
And as we get more unified, Occupy Oakland had police come and do damage to them physically, throw tear gas, beat them, harm them, and then general strike was in relation to that. So what happens when we become more unified? We're already networked with Occupy Albany, Occupy Wall Street, Occupy Philadelphia, and Occupy Tampa. What happens when the same thing occurs there and general strike goes there? Well, then we're going to have it across the board. So we feel like it is going to become a new level of the whole occupation is going to reach to a new level, because what's the response once you start having general strikes and start, globally saying this past couple of days, bank transfer, take your money out of corporate banks. It's just constantly becoming a greater call to arms.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's the other piece too. What you just said is, removing your money from these major banks. The only way they get the money to loan out, 10 times what they can is because we keep putting money in their banks, and they use that against us. Again, we pay for our own enslavement, which is completely insane. But sure, I definitely see that happening, and it's definitely brilliant. But you guys also mentioned a lot of abuse going on too. I just want to quickly touch on some of that stuff. Like in Melbourne, there was a lot of police violence going against the Melbourne in Australia. I'm talking about a lot of violence going on through the Occupy movement there. That veteran, what was his name? Scott Olson, I believe, from Occupy Oakland. He was a two-time Iraq war veteran that still, from last I read anyway, still cannot speak because he got shot in the forehead with a rubber bullet at close range. But also, at the same Occupy Oakland piece, policemen they threw a flash grenade into a crowd trying to the crowd themselves were trying to help an injured protester. You know, a lot of different things like what was the mayor, Jean Kwan, I think her name is, in Occupy Oakland, because she's in hot water from last I saw because of the riots that were occurring. And Denver, you know, Denver police, they were using tear gas and rubber bullets and batons and pepper spray on protesters as well. You know, even in England, you know, Cameron is seeking to ban all the protest camps now, and that was mainly in relation to the church. You know, but what's happening with the police, too, I mean, what's happening, the United States police officials are in Israel right now for counterterrorism program. And the officials are from New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and a senior officer from the Italian National Police counterterrorism unit is also participating in the seminar. So they're being trained by, you know, Israel again regarding this stuff. And, you know, just think how Israel, for instance, what they have done to the Palestinians, pushing them into the Gaza Strip, which is basically a giant open-air concentration camp, you know, after stealing their land in 1948 when Israel was created by the Rothschilds after World War II. But also, you know, with the Occupy movement, the police abuse. The police are using bulldozers to break up Occupy, where was that, Richmond. You know, and when you look at, you know, when you see people showing up to these Occupy movements, and who are the ones that actually look like they're the rioters, you know? There's a lot of, it's mostly all peaceful protesters. I saw some of these black bloc anarchist people. I forget which Occupy that was, but when you look at it, that's a lot of the police themselves. I think that was in Oakland, actually, going into these Occupy movements and creating violence to make the peaceful protesters look bad, you know, causing destruction and all this kind of stuff. So, but on another note, too, on a side note, what is also beautiful is there's actually officials that are behind a lot of the good stuff going on, too. Like, for instance, New York cops defy order to arrest hundreds of Occupy Albany protesters. And I know you said just a few minutes ago, one of you guys, you've been in connection with Occupy Albany. And the Occupy Albany protesters in the New York Capitol, you know, Albany, received an unexpected, I'm just reading this from a little sheet I got here, ally over the week, the state and local authorities. According to the Albany Times-Union, New York state troopers and Albany police did not adhere to a curfew crackdown on protesters urged by Governor Andrew Cuomo and Albany Mayor Gerald Jennings. But along with this, there's other states too, like Nashville. A Nashville judge, if you can look on YouTube, there's a YouTube video of this judge talking, tells cops, quote, "You have no lawful basis to arrest Occupy protesters." Beautiful seeing that coming from a judge. In Occupy Baltimore, you know, they win support of the police and firefighters unions. And at the same time, officials refuse Tennessee governor's orders to break up Occupy Nashville. So there's a lot of great, you know, people that are in supposed quote-unquote power that are also refusing to go along with suppressing the movement. So what's your take on not only the negativity, you know, the violence, but also the positivity, like the ones that are standing behind you guys as well?
Well, what's great about this movement is that it's a catch-22 for the police and all those who wish to quell this. If they do attack us, we get more popularity. If they don't, we get more popularity, and it's that simple. It is good that this is happening. I mean, we have officials. I know in Albany, Albany is a very good situation. You know, the state troopers basically said, no, we're not doing this, defying the order from Cuomo. The DA there basically said, I can't charge these people because they're not breaking the law, and there was that national judge you mentioned. All these things are good because they're small steps towards what we want to see, which is more interactivity with the people that are downtrodden and more honest political people. You know, that's important. That's what we need, is that we can't be bowing down to the interests of corporations or politicians that wish to see this movement go down so they can continue the status quo. And that's the thing that we need to get rid of, is the status quo. I know in Oakland as well, I just briefly mentioned, you talked about the police there. Unfortunately, they have a very violent history, and they did basically beef up their police force. And the thing is, they're persevering. They're continuing, and they're getting more and more support. So this is good. I mean, this is a very, I believe personally, it's a very, very long movement that's going to occur. It's going to take years and years. This is the beginning, and we are making big, big strides in progress.
Absolutely. And, you know, I'm glad to hear the other, aspects of that too, as the positivity growing, as far as in Oakland as well. Because it's you're right. You're absolutely right. I mean, if they create violence, it makes you look good. If they support you, it makes you look good. So either way, absolutely, I agree 100%. It definitely helps out either way. Last point I want to make here, and then I'm going to leave the rest for you guys here. We only got about 8 minutes left. I want to touch on a few things that, in my view, are starting to tear the Occupy movement apart from within. There's a lot of organizations and political-based groups and, left, right, the illusion of that paradigm and all these things, trying to infiltrate these groups. And, I've seen a lot of disturbing things come from some people from Occupy Wall Street. For instance, there's a lot of manipulating going on with the protest to call for a global government. A world government, a world central bank, a world single electronic currency, and a world army to impose the will of the world government is precisely what the cabal that controls the banks have been working towards. And I've seen this being called on, where we need a global government by some of the people of Occupy Wall Street. I'm not saying they're all saying this. And it's this same cabal that manipulated the people's revolutions, that changed nothing in Egypt, caused mass murder of the innocent in Libya from the NATO bombardment of civilians, and wishes to do the same in Syria, Iran, and many more countries. With that, Occupy Wall Street also, I saw this, is demanding a global UN tax, which is exactly what the Rothschild cabal wants. And with this, the intention is likely to fund the UN as a part of the final push to rationalize and perfect the initial stages of the true world government. The movement toward world government is happening very quickly now, and this has been a long, long agenda. That's why they created the unions like the European Union, and they're still attempting to create the North American Union, which would combine America, United States of America, Canada, and Mexico into a union. We have the African Union now, with the United States military, with AFRICOM, and they have the Asian Pacific Union. So the unions, again, are just another step towards this through things such as free trade barriers and all that kind of stuff that have, like NAFTA, that has helped to create these things. And instead of achieving freedom from the central bank debt enslavement, there's some, I would say some naive occupiers appear to have taken the bait, of some of the manipulation, pulling the mob towards endorsing a global taxation system, and one to be administered, by a brand new global government body, and it's important to look at all of this stuff, and that's why you guys need to, in my view, stay independent. Along with all this stuff being called for the global government, I don't know if you guys saw recently that the Vatican, which is basically the Church of Babylon relocated, called for a world central bank as well, and this is for the establishment of a global public authority, that's what they said, and a central world bank to rule over financial institutions. And again, it just goes right along with the same agenda. And all the different political sides are directed by the same force to give the illusion of choice, regardless if you call yourself Republican, Democrat, whatever. Again, these are all illusions of choice. That's, same thing with the news organizations, where you watch all these different news organizations, but again, they all get the news from the same place, AP and Reuters. And on one more note, there's a part of that I saw, and I want to know what you guys think about all this stuff I just said. The Lucis Trust, which, by the way, used to be called a Lucifer Trust a long time ago before they changed it to Lucis Trust, is behind at least a portion of the web-based part of Occupy Wall Street. And I'm just going to read this little blurb here. On 15th of October 2011 began the worldwide action. For the first time in history, upwards of 15 million people in 60 countries marched together for a global change. Their official website is http, 15october.net. Someone decided to find out who owns that domain name by visiting this site. It's whogodaddy.com, and it's a database, whatever, that doesn't matter, but they found it's connected to the Lucis Trust. So again, Lucis Trust is another one, the Democratic Move On and all this other stuff trying to infiltrate the movement to sway it in one direction or another. And that's why we got to be careful, because a global bank, a global military, a global economic system, a global currency, and all this stuff is the exact agenda that the global economic cabal wants. So what's your view on that?
Personally, I believe these occupations are centered around the idea of community, and community committing to a collective sacrifice, sacrificing their time, their jobs, whatever the case may be, to bring about huge structural change. And what you're saying is, and not to knock down Wall Street, not to knock the motherland of the occupation, but personally, when I went down there as an ambassador, it's becoming tourist sites, and that's the problem with a lot of these occupations that are growing too fast. How do you keep community when there's so many people that want to be a part of it, that have their own really strong views on what should be done, and they range from the left to the right. So does community get lost for this giant influx of people and their ideologies, and that makes it really susceptible to co-opting, like you're saying, and like one person who's been there a while can have a strong voice, and they can be going for this global unification like you're talking about. So that's all dilemmas that each occupation really has to face. Here in Occupy Poughkeepsie, we have a really strong community, and so we don't really worry about co-opting because we're all on the same page on how we treat everyone that comes in, especially when it comes to political parties and whatnot. What you said about global unification and a World Bank and one World Army, personally, and once again, this is the thing about occupation. It's all individual. So my beliefs are that there can be absolutely no discussion about a global government until local governments are fixed, until national governments are fixed. In no way in hell can we try to form broken nations into one large, huge already broken nation. We haven't fixed our own problems yet, so how can we speak about in a larger arena?
Right.
Right?
Absolutely. Anyone else? Because we have a minute and 13 seconds left, and I want to give you guys just a minute to maybe provide your website, provide your Facebook page, provide the address where you guys are, and all that kind of stuff. So what do you guys want to add? We have 1 minute left.
Well, we can definitely use contact information. We're starting a journal assembly soon. So we have occupypoughkeepsie.org. It's our new site where it's updating every day now. We're using it as the hub for Occupy Poughkeepsie, and that's directly linked with our Facebook and Twitter. You can also check out our Facebook and Twitter individually. Occupy Poughkeepsie is the Facebook page, and Occupy PK on Twitter. And we plan on updating you 24/7 eventually. But we do update plenty of times a day, and we have our needs there, our events, and we do have a rally on the 12th. It's a march and rally. We're expecting quite a few number of people, hopefully hundreds, and we're basically going to be here every day, and the 12th is our peak, and that's what we're looking forward to, and that's what we're working for every day.
All right, beautiful. Thank you very much, guys. Support Occupy Poughkeepsie, everyone, and head down there. It's at Hulme Park in Poughkeepsie, and support these guys. Thank you very much, and I appreciate the input from all of you.
Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
All right, take care.
Okay.